Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Ghost Ship, Gay Demons, and Groping Cosby. Plus This Day in History with the USS Liberty 50 and our Song of the Day by She-Devils on your Morning Monarchy for June 8th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to wherever you are in the world for listener-supported media brought to you by you. Coming to you, as always, from the Peak Portland studios up here in Portland, Oregon. There's a high of 63 today and very rainy. That's the kind of temperature I like, and it's a perfect day for holy hexes. We are brought to you by you and all our supporters and patrons and subscribers and fans and cheerleaders and everybody. MediaMonarchy.com/support. That's got the Bitcoin, which I know nobody's really giving up any Bitcoin at the moment. We've also got our post office box. And again, a huge thanks to our friends like Megan, who sent us a sippy cup, our buddy Charles, who sent us Simpsons DVDs, and those of you out there who sometimes just send checks or cash because you don't do any kind of digital money. We also have some digital money, paypal.me/MediaMonarchy, and the best way, the way I most recommend to help us the most, Media Monarchy on Patreon, patreon.com/MediaMonarchy. That automatically gives us the monthly support that we need, and it's very easy to adjust your monthly donations. Sometimes people need to turn it down. Sometimes people need to turn it up. Hope you get turned up for Media Monarchy. Again, glad you're here. If you can give a little, I can give a lot, my friends. We are brought to you by you. And a huge thanks to the Truth Seeker app and RadioConfluence.com. And in the position we're in, so I'm having some server issues. Spoiler alert. So your Truth Seeker app doesn't actually have your latest episode of your Morning Monarchy. However, RadioConfluence.com generally simulcasts all your live Media Monarchy broadcasts, and they even do a little bit of replays as well. So huge thanks to RadioConfluence.com. So there's server woes, and it's not just that I filled the thing up. There seems to be some problems, and I'm trying to update something, but I need to update this other thing before I can update that other thing. So as it stands, as I come to you right now, 2 minutes after 9 a.m. Pacific Time, Thursday morning, June 8th, 2017, fortunately, the website's fine. All the stuff is there. All the archives are there. And we are streaming live. MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Please tell a friend. We are independent radio, streaming live out of Portland, Oregon. My live stream is where you're going to be able to get the shows until I can get it fixed. I can't upload any new content. Fortunately, yesterday's Morning Monarchy is up on YouTube in its entirety. I didn't even cut the song out, that fantastic song from Secret Sisters. It is all up on YouTube in its entirety. How about you check out that latest episode of New World next week, where we talk about Reality Winner getting intercepted. Then click on over and you can watch that latest episode and listen to the entire episode yesterday of your Morning Monarchy. So it's all on the stream here, MediaMonarchy.com/listen. We also do a replay of our own shows, as we are streaming live Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Hey, by the way, we are also on the awesome peer-to-peer sharing video site BitChute as well. So you can find your Morning Monarchy from yesterday there as well. And I imagine unless I get all this stuff fixed today, which doesn't exactly seem likely, it'll all be up on the streams. So hopefully this one little unfortunate hiccup will actually make people come over and check out the stream live. Thursday is Holy Hexes Day. Each day of the week we focus in on a different area of news in the Media Monarchy kingdom. I've told you before. Monday, world news. Tuesday is technology. Wednesday is food, health, and environment news. Friday, tomorrow, we talk about the entertainment industrial complex. And we've also got your latest installment of Deep Focus. A look at films and shows that are important. I think we might have to talk about American Made tomorrow. I know it's not even out yet, but we should get ahead of the drug mule. Thursdays are Holy Hexes. Hashtag Holy Hexes. I got that name from Reverend Billy. I interviewed him several years ago, and I heard him use that phrase, and I kind of took it and ran with it, but I like to give credit, of course, where credit is due. Just like everything we say and play will be included in the show notes, as always. Generally speaking, this is always a free speech zone. We're angry when even the songs we play ended up being edited. I feel like I owe you swears then sometimes. But the extra warning I like to always give on Thursdays, it's not for kids, not safe for work. Thursdays we get into the dark, occult, conspiratorial madness. But as always, we glance at the breaking lamestream news. The headline round the world. Comey testimony. Lordy, I hope there are tapes. Gets more Nixonian by the moment, doesn't it? And as Comey breaks his silence, where's Trump? No tweets from America's next top president. Now, the funny thing about all this stuff is, Comey went today and acted out the script he had already published yesterday. Everybody knew exactly everything he was going to say. We head back to Peak Portland, though, with the next headline. Some question police detaining crowd during Sunday protest. After Portland police pushed protesters out of Chapman Square in downtown Portland Sunday afternoon, they started searching for suspects who they say threw shit at them. Such a charade. Don't, as I like to often say, don't get involved in the game of everybody wearing their little funny costumes and acting like they're on different sides. They're all in the giant play of propping up the state. That's essentially how it works. So again, I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you joining us. This is your Morning Monarchy, Holy Hexes edition, and as long as we're talking about Portland, we may as well continue to cover the story as we did last week. The man accused of killing 2 men and wounding a third who tried to stop his anti-Muslim tirade against 2 teenagers on a Portland, Oregon light rail train shouted he was not guilty Wednesday during another courtroom outburst directed at one of the victims, Jeremy Christian. 35 didn't enter a formal plea during his brief court appearance, but said he was not guilty of anything but defending myself against the violent aggression of Micah Fletcher. Fletcher was in the courtroom, but said nothing to reporters and displayed no reaction as he left with his father. The 21-year-old was stabbed in the neck during the May 26th attack that killed Ricky Best and Talisha Namkai Mechi. The stabbings shocked the liberal city and deepened worries about a series of apparent hate crimes in the region and contentious public rallies that have drawn national attention. Prosecutors who have reviewed videos and interviews with witnesses say in court papers that Christian yelled hateful comments at 2 black girls, one of whom was wearing a hijab. When the girls moved away from Christian, he made a sudden move toward Namkai Mechi. The two got in a confrontation, prompting Fletcher to stand up. Christian shoved Fletcher in the chest and then pulled out a knife that he concealed in his right hand. Prosecutor Ryan Lufkin wrote, Fletcher pushed Christian back, causing him to stumble. Christian asked Fletcher to hit me again, as Fletcher kept telling him to get off the train. Christian then stabbed Fletcher, Namkai Mechi, and a third man who intervened, and that was Best. Christian was arraigned yesterday, Wednesday, in a 15-count indictment charging him with aggravated murder, attempted murder, and other crimes. The hearing lasted about 2 minutes. And he's due again in court on July 18th. He's being held without bail at a jail in downtown Portland, which I got to tell you, from the commercial radio station, you can look out the window and see it. I don't know if you've ever noticed this in your cities, where the big downtown jails are. You'll notice these giant contraption holes in the sidewalks. They bring the prisoners in and out through basically a tunnel system. So you can look around and you can see basically, oh, that's where the tunnel system are. Oh, they bring the paddy wagon up to that thing. Fascinating. So you can watch it all unfold while you're up in your cube. That's a whole discussion right there. Oh, good thing I'm free up here in my cube. Oh, Christ. Court officials made the hearing earlier and banned live streaming in an effort to avoid the chaos that erupted at Christian's first court appearance, which we played for you last week. Last week, Christian shouted, "You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism." And spectators watched a video feed in the hallway because they could not get a seat nearby, brawled with one of the suspect's supporters before turning their anger against sheriff's deputies. Again, mission accomplished. Divide and conquer. Everybody hates each other. Put it on a big banner on a giant aircraft carrier. Now, the final paragraph of this article, which comes from OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting. Really interesting. I did not know this part. And this, I think, helps figure a bit of it out. 4 charges in Christian's indictment stem from a confrontation Christian had with a black woman at a light rail station the day before the killings. He hit her in the face with a bottle before she pepper sprayed him. Famed Portland Police Sergeant Pete Simpson said. I've talked to that guy on the phone before, just while I said, okay, we're rolling, go ahead. Really interesting. So basically, the day before he went on the tirade and killed people, he basically got his ass kicked and pepper sprayed by a black lady. So he was coming back the next day all aggroed. God. One of the other side stories to this Portland murder story, and again, you guys, this is pretty damn close. I know we heard that jerk Ben talking on the radio the other day about London Bridge is like 30 miles away. This is like 30 blocks away, you guys. One of the worst parts about this, insult to injury, I suppose, someone stole Max Attack's victim's wedding ring and backpack. As all the chaos was breaking out, someone took the opportunity to steal things. Fortunately, they've been arrested. The ring and a backpack belonged to Rick Best. Stealing murder victim stuff from the crime scene. Keeping it classy, Portland. Good stuff. Let's continue to stay in Oregon, the People's Republic of Oregon, as they sometimes call it, as the parents of a prematurely born infant who died within hours of her birth now face murder charges. Sarah Mitchell, 24, and her 21-year-old husband, Travis Mitchell, are members of the Followers of Christ Church in Oregon City. The church is known for practicing faith healing and rejecting medical care and modern science in favor of prayer and anointment with oil. Sarah gave birth to 2 girls at her parents' home. One of the girls, Jennifer Michelle, had died. Dr. Karen Gunson said Jennifer Michelle was born prematurely. Family members and other people from the church were present for the births. Autopsy showed the infant died of natural causes. No one called 911. Susie Shoemaker, a former member of the Followers of Christ Church, said their scriptures tell them not to put faith in doctors. Sarah and Travis Mitchell were arrested on Monday. The Mitchells will be the 5th Followers of Christ Church couple in Oregon City charged for relying on faith healing for kids. Sarah Mitchell testified in the trial of her sister, Shannon Hickman, and her husband, Dale, in 2011 when their baby died. Her sister went to prison and remains behind bars, serving a sentence for manslaughter. It's like a family tradition. Sarah is a direct descendant of church minister Walter White, who brought a congregation to Oregon City when he broke off from Idaho. Sometimes, Idaho's just not white and conservative enough for you. You got to head over to Oregon City. Oregon changed laws to prosecute faith healing parents for kids. It is still legal in Idaho, despite calls from police, doctors, and former members. Walter White. You can't make this stuff up, you guys. That's why it's so fascinating to go over these things each and every day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. I think that's always why it's really important that we do This Day in History at the end of every show. It gives us the subtext. It gives us the context. That's the thing I've always hated about mainstream media. It's like it lives in this vacuum that doesn't know anything about the day before, let alone the week or year before. You are listening to Your Morning Monarchy, Holy Hexes edition. It's the dark one. Thursday, June 8th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Oakland ghost ship manager and deputy charged with 36 counts of manslaughter.
Felony charges filed in the Oakland warehouse fire that took 36 lives. The man who ran the ghost ship and the man who planned an illegal party are now both behind bars. The prosecutor described the ghost ship as a fire trap. She said the night of the fire, one of the exits was blocked. KPIX5 reporter Emily Turner on the 2 men being blamed for the disaster and who is not. Emily?
The district attorney squarely puts the blame on those 2 men. However, the owner of that building has no criminal charges posted against them. But the victims' families say this is not the end for them. These are the 2 men charged with the devastation and deaths of the ghost ship fire. Derek Almena was the master tenant who sublet the ghost ship to artists. Max Harris was the self-described warlord of the building. Both now face 36 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 for each person who lost their life the night of December 2nd.
Defendants Almena and Harris knowingly created a fire trap with inadequate means of escape. They then filled that area with human beings and are now facing the consequences of their actions.
Those consequences could be up to 39 years behind bars, but for at least some of the victims' families, that's still not enough.
The owners of this building knew what was going on, and they were responsible for what happened here. They failed to prevent it and failed to make sure that the building was safe.
Even Harris himself agrees on that matter and said so in an interview we did with him last year.
Ultimately, it should fall on, the property holder. I mean, they're the ones that gave us a space with messed up electricity, with no sprinkler system, with no means of really addressing any of these grievances in a way that would solve anything.
But the district attorney says her investigation is done, and the only charges are the ones they've filed against these two. Both are currently in jail, arrested this morning. Harris was arrested in Los Angeles and Almena in Lake County.
I lead my 3 children down there every night.
Almena told the Today Show back in December he'd rather be trampled by the victims' parents than be held accountable. But it seems he'll have to face the courts first.
This is a mass grave.
So for the families, can you...
I'm only here to say one thing, that I am incredibly sorry.
Neither one of these men has made it back here to Alameda County yet. However, Almena was in court today. Here's a picture that was taken just this afternoon. He is the one to the right of your screen in the green and white stripes. You can see he's shackled. That is in Lake County, where he has to make his first appearance there before he can make it back here to Alameda County. Now, we did reach out to his attorney. They were not available on camera. However, they did send us a statement that says, quote, "This is a miscarriage of justice," and that he is being used as a scapegoat in this case, and they plan to fight vigorously in court on his behalf. Liz?
Yeah, Emily, you mentioned this a little bit in your story. It is noteworthy that prosecutors are not going after the building's owner.
Exactly. In the press conference today, the district attorney says that Almena is the one who is responsible from changing this building from an industrial site to a residential site, that was not in the lease with the owner at all. And so when he made that change, it was his responsibility, they say, to make sure that there was a fire plan, an escape route, a fire extinguisher, a sprinkler system, etc. And because he did not do that, he is culpable for all of those deaths.
All right, Emily Turner, thank you. Relatives of the ghost ship victims are also seeking justice in the courts. To date, 18 families have joined a civil suit against PG&E, the building's owner, and a dozen other defendants. The suit claims PG&E knew or should have known about the electrical dangers in the warehouse. The suit also accuses a next-door neighbor of doing unlicensed electrical work on the property. Meanwhile, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf said this about the men charged, saying, quote, "For years, they worked hard to escape legal scrutiny and deceive city officials. Because of their callous disregard for human life, they deserve to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law."
I just have it from our friends in the tweets at Courage Sower that lots of other places are shutting down. Stockton just shut down several buildings. Cities in Northern California are closing buildings that have code violations out of fear of prosecution. And in a way, this ties in with the battles that are happening in all of your cities. Your mega urban metropolises, metropoli. And I think in some way it also connects, at least in the meme sphere, to all the attacks on your concerts. Let's continue your Holy Hexes edition of your Morning Monarchy as we go from the ghost ship to gay demons. A judge held a juror in contempt and declared a mistrial Tuesday in the case of a North Carolina church minister charged in the beating of a congregant who says he was attacked to expel his, quote, homosexual demons. This is a follow-up. We talked about this story last week. The trial had just kicked off. Now, Superior Court Judge Gary Gavinis immediately sentenced the juror Perry Shade Jr. to 30 days in jail, $500 fine. Gavinis said Shade brought in 3 documents Tuesday and handed them out to his fellow jurors. One of the documents was North Carolina case law. Gavinis said he wasn't sure when a new trial would be scheduled for Brooke Covington, age 58, a longtime minister at Word of Faith Fellowship in Spindale, North Carolina. Covington faced up to 2 years in prison if convicted on charges of kidnapping and assaulting former member Matthew Finner in January 2013. This juror has impaired the integrity and fairness of the trial. Therefore, I am removing this juror and declaring a mistrial. The audience gasped. Finner dropped his head. I instructed jurors over and over again not to do research. You're in direct criminal contempt, Gavin has said, ordering the bailiff to handcuff Shade, age 71. 30 days in jail and $500 fine. You are under arrest. Get him out of here.
A judge held a juror in contempt and declared a mistrial Tuesday in the case of a North Carolina church minister charged in the beating of Matthew Fenner, a congregant who says he was attacked to expel his homosexual demons. Superior Court Judge Gary Gavinus immediately sentenced the juror, Perry Shade Jr., to 30 days in jail and a $500 fine. Gavinus said Shade brought in 3 documents Tuesday and handed them out to his fellow jurors. One of the documents was North Carolina case law. Gavinus told the courtroom, "This juror has impaired the integrity and fairness of the trial. Therefore, I am removing this juror and declaring a mistrial. I instructed the jurors over and over again not to do research," said the judge, who then stared at Shade before having him removed from the courtroom.
Remember, don't do any research. That's bad. Now, as long as we're updating stories that we've previously covered here on the Holy Hexes edition of Your Morning Monarchy, we'll continue to do that. The story ping-ponged around the web in the usual media locations, indicating that a Los Angeles Superior Court judge had decided not to dismiss 2 wrongful death lawsuits against actor Jim Carrey that grew out of the suicide of his Irish on-again, off-again girlfriend, Katarina White, who died in September 2015 at the age of 30. Carrey is being sued by Kat White's husband, a man named Mark Burton, and by Kat's mother, Bridget Sweetman, who each blamed Jim Carrey after Kat overdosed on drugs that had been prescribed to Carrey and that she had apparently taken from his apartment. None of the stories mentioned the detail discovered by TonyOrtega.org that Kat White was a Scientologist who had been stalled on the survival rundown when she took her life, and that Burton is also a Scientologist who, Kat's friends say, married her out of convenience so she could get a green card and stay in the country after Jim Carrey refused to marry her. Tony Ortega writes, "We had been driving between Portland and Seattle on a leg of a book tour that summer when we first got a message from one of our best, most trusted sources who told us that the young woman in the news for killing herself had actually been a Scientologist. We confirmed it with another of our sources later in the day, and on the morning of September 30th, we broke the news and tabloid reporters from both sides of the Atlantic started ringing us. Pete Griffiths helped us nail the next detail, the identity of Kat's SRD and purification rundown twin, an actor named Travis Case, who works as Ashton Kutcher's stand-in. Scientology often has members pair up to get through courses together, and the purification rundown and the survival rundown are both physically and mentally grueling. And then they also started to learn something about the young Scientology Hollywood types that Kat had been involved with. One of the things making Scientology's involvement interesting was that Jim Carrey had made fun of Scientology numerous times and seemed to want nothing to do with it. Former Scientology official Claire Headley provided TonyOrtega.org with their next scoop, that Carrey had in fact been the focus of an intense effort by the church to bring him in and get him on the Purif, spearheaded by Shelley Miscavige, wife of Scientology leader David Miscavige. Yes, the same Shelley who vanished a few years later in 2005. Claire suggested that Scientology would still consider Carrey a prize and would not have hesitated to use a Scientology like Kat White to work on bringing him in. They tried it in the past, and they would do it again. And then came the bombshell. The Daily Mail discovered from the Los Angeles coroner that Kat was actually married. Even some of her close friends had no idea and were stunned at the news. A marriage certificate was quickly located for Kat and Mark Burton in Clark County, Nevada. But who's Mark Burton? Tony Ortega managed to locate a couple of photos of him from his friends who had been involved in the small-time video shoots where Kat had been a makeup artist. They also began to learn more about Kat's past in Ireland and how she had first run into Scientology through a famous Austrian family of artists who lived in a castle in Tipperary. They also learned something fascinating about Burton's past. He was the stepson of Duke Snyder, one of Scientology's most notorious spies who had helped run the church's infiltration of the U.S. federal government in the 1970s, the Snow White program. Snyder was among 11 top Scientology officials convicted and sent to prison for the Snow White operation. Fascinating. Glad we could get that update on the story that we briefly covered last week. The Scientology connections run deep. One other quick story. Scientology church moves in, condo developer moves on. This out of Ventura County, the Church of Scientology of Santa Barbara has purchased an office building off Seward Avenue in Ventura with plans to house the church chapel rooms for parishioners to study the religion and administrative offices, as well as for community gatherings and activities. Basically, anybody else associated with this building have all said, okay, have fun, we're out. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy. Glad you're here. It is the dark and disturbing version of your morning news show. Our buddy Lauren Coleman, always doing fantastic work, pointing out the sinks, the copycat effect. And he's got a lot on the London Bridge attack. He mentioned some really interesting sinks that have to do with Jupiter. Jupiter was very bright and apparent in the sky, only a few degrees from the moon, and there were other Jupiter connections with the London Bridge. On June 13th, 1984, the HMS Jupiter was leaving the Pool of London after a visit to the capital, and she collided with the London Bridge, causing significant damage to both the ship and bridge. The ship's captain was later court-martialed. London Bridge is usually rather calm. On February 28th, 1992, a bomb exploded at London Bridge Station, injuring 29. On June 3rd, 1982, the Israeli ambassador to the court of St. James, Shlomo Argov, was shot outside the Dorchester Hotel by 3 gunmen from the Abu Nidal group. The ambassador survived a 3-month coma, but he was basically a vegetable for the rest of his life in 2003. The first bridge near this site was built in about 50 AD, probably by the Romans. That version of the London Bridge was begun in 1971 and first opened on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1973. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. Speaking of fair ladies, a really interesting story, much too long to get into. But I will add an interview featuring Johnny Vedmore when he was on the Richie Allen show the other day. Who was Theresa May's father, and why is he being erased from history? Really fascinating story that gets into the past of Theresa May and her father, and where he worked as a priest, and how he worked really close to a notorious medical serial killer, and all the other strange connections that, of course, connect to institutional child abuse and sacrifice. It's baked in, if you will, to the medical establishment in the UK. So the interesting part about a lot of this is that her father is basically being removed from history, as it were. If you try and go look for him now on Wikipedia, the articles that used to be there have been disappeared. Theresa May's father was Reverend Hubert Brazier, B-R-A-S-I-E-R. Born August 20th, 1917. There is a fascinating long story by Johnny Vedmore up on the swamp.media. Far too deep to get into in this spot, and again, I'll point you out to the Richie Allen show, who had Johnny Vedmore on. Nearly everywhere you look, with the powers that shouldn't be, there's some type of Pedogate-related stories. So I know our buddy Ray Vahi, among others, really into Season 5 of House of Cards, and I haven't seen any of it. But what Ray noted, or rather asked even, did anyone else notice that quick bit of pedophile-related political blackmail in House of Cards? Now, I'm not sure if it's going to become a part of the storyline or if it's just one of those little nuggets that gets put in there. God, I hope it's not. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with the governor of Ohio. As we now move into our Pedogate news. Former Pennsylvania State University President Graham B. Spanier was ordered Friday to spend at least 2 months in jail and another 2 months on house arrest for endangering children by failing to report signs that Jerry Sandusky was sexually abusing boys.
3 former Penn State administrators are going to jail for their part in the Jerry Sandusky sexual abuse scandal at Penn State. The AP reported Friday that former Penn State President Graham Spanier had been sentenced to 4 to 12 months after his child endangerment conviction. The 68-year-old Spanier will spend the first 2 months of his sentence in jail and be placed under house arrest for the rest of his sentence. Former athletic director Tim Curley received a sentence of 7 to 23 months, with the first 3 months being served in jail, while former Vice President Gary Schultz was sentenced to 6 to 23 months, with the first 2 months of his sentence behind bars. Both pled guilty to child endangerment charges. Judge John Bocabella oversaw the case against all three and said they ignored the opportunity to put an end to his crimes when they had a chance to do so. Bocabella also questioned why the late Joe Paterno didn't do more, saying Paterno could have made that phone call without so much as getting his hands dirty. Why he didn't is beyond me. Jerry Sandusky is currently serving a 30 to 60-year prison sentence after being found guilty of child molestation.
These men are good people who made a terrible mistake, the judge said, but he chided the three and others connected to the scandal, including late coach Joe Paterno, soon to be played by Al Pacino, in a feature film, for what he said was an inexcusable failure. Why no one made a phone call to the police is beyond me. Spanier, Curley, and Schultz, sounds like stooges if I've ever heard of any, are to begin serving their sentences July 15th. Friday's nearly 4-hour-long hearing capped what had been a controversial prosecution of top Penn State administrators who investigators said had a chance to stop a serial sex predator, but instead chose to protect the school and their own reputations. Yet again, Penn State's Spanier gets jail for role in Sandusky scandal. Really strange story coming from NME. Slipknot frontman Corey Taylor has spoken about reasons for speaking out about the sexual abuse he suffered in his childhood. Corey Taylor, from Slipknot, author of New York Times best-selling books, appeared on Viceland's The Therapist recently, of course. So I believe I learned from a Benny Hill episode that, of course, The Therapist, there was like a little sign maker guy, and he started to put the sign up, but he didn't connect the parts of the word, and it said The Rapist. Corey Taylor recently appeared on Viceland's The Rapist, revealing that he was raped by someone in the neighborhood as a child. Now in a new interview with Revolver, Taylor spoke about having a responsibility as a famous musician to use his platform for inspiration and guidance. Quote, "There's an unwritten responsibility that comes with this gig, that people, they look to you for inspiration and guidance, whether you like it or not. And I know a lot of people that don't like that responsibility. I take it very, very seriously. So in a lot of ways, I try to lead by example. And yeah, it's uncomfortable to open up like that. But at the same time, if you can't talk about an issue, how are you going to fix it? I know there's a giant stigma that comes with therapy and dealing with issues with demons. A lot of people don't want to talk about it or look down at it or tend to make fun of people or engaging in it. I'm trying to break that down by showing people that, yes, I go to therapy as well, and I'm still trying to work out my demons and the things that I went through in my life. Will I ever get it all figured out? Probably not. But that's why it's a process. So if me bearing my shit and laying it all out helps people start to work on theirs as well, then where's the negative part of that? Basically, he was raped by a neighborhood kid. This has nothing to do with any sort of institutional abuse at schools or churches. Just another thug in the neighborhood. Of course, probably continuing the abuse that kid had. It's the cycle repeats and repeats. Let's continue with our Holy Hexes updates. As Bill Cosby's chief accuser took the stand at his sexual assault trial Tuesday to tell her story publicly for the first time, saying the comedian groped her after giving her 3 blue pills that left her paralyzed and helpless. In my head, I was trying to get my hands to move or my legs to move, but I was frozen. Andrea Konstad, a 44-year-old former employee of the basketball program at Temple University, Cosby's alma mater, said in their long-awaited courtroom confrontation, "I wasn't able to fight in any way. I wanted it to stop." Bill Cosby, age 79, is charged with drugging and violating Konstad at his suburban Philadelphia home in 2004. The TV star, once dubbed America's Dad, could get 10 years in prison if convicted. Konstad, an athletic 6-footer with colorful arm tattoos and a mane of dark curly hair, could face a bruising cross-examination from Cosby's lawyers, who have argued that the two had a romantic relationship, that she wasn't incapacitated, and that the sexual encounter was consensual. Now, I've got a couple of stories about the Cosby trial, and indeed they did do that. Bill Cosby trial lawyers attack accusers' credibility.
Bill Cosby in court. He arrived for the first day of his trial with his TV daughter by his side. ABC's Lindsay Davis is outside the courtroom in Pennsylvania, where she spoke exclusively with Keisha Knight Pulliam about standing by her TV dad. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Amy. Keisha Knight Pulliam has said all along that the allegations simply don't reflect the Bill Cosby she has known. She was inside the court yesterday, so were several of Bill Cosby's accusers. One of them took the witness stand, and the cross-examination was brutal. Right at Bill Cosby's side for his first day of court, Keisha Knight Pulliam, who played the youngest daughter, Rudy, on The Cosby Show.
Thank you, Daddy.
It's just really important for me to be here to show my support for Mr. Cosby. At the end of the day, it's the jury's job to discern the truth.
Cosby was very engaged and attentive in court, often facing the jury during opening arguments. Prosecutors say this case is about trust, betrayal, and the inability to consent, while the defense argues that Andrea Constand, the former Temple University employee who says Cosby drugged and sexually assaulted her, has changed her story multiple times, pointing out that after initially telling detectives she never reached out to Cosby after the 2004 incident, phone logs indicate she called him 53 times. Cosby says the encounter was consensual, and while the 79-year-old has been accused by more than 50 women of drugging and or sexual misconduct, jurors will only hear from 2 accusers in this case. On Monday, a former assistant to Cosby's agent cried as she painstakingly testified that in 1996, Cosby made her take a pill that she said made her feel like she was underwater before sexually assaulting her. But Cosby's attorney pounced, drawing attention to multiple inconsistencies in her story, claiming she had selective amnesia. The prosecution's first witness today is a forensic toxicologist. Now, based on the prosecution's opening statement, they're likely to testify that the symptoms that Andrea Constand experienced after taking the pills that Bill Cosby gave her were consistent with Benadryl or Quaaludes. Amy.
All right, Lindsay, thanks so much. And let's bring in ABC News chief legal analyst Dan Abrams. And Dan, Andrea Constand may testify as early as today, but as we just heard in Lindsay's report, that other accuser took the stand yesterday. How important was she in this case?
She's critical because, look, we know the potential problems with Andrea Constand's testimony, which is it took her a while to report it, there are inconsistencies in her story, this happened a long time ago, etc. If the jurors believe the other woman, they look at Andrea Constand's testimony in a completely different way. If they believe her, then everything Andrea Constand says may ring true. Everything Andrea Constand says maybe is viewed through giving her the benefit of the doubt. Without that, it's just Andrea Constand on her own and whether these jurors believe her or not.
We heard in Lindsay's report that the defense pounced on that other witness. Is that risky?
Yeah, it's always risky, right? When you've got someone who's in tears on the witness stand talking about what she says happened to her in a horrible experience, it's always risky, but they had to. The defense had to go after her, and they had to go after her hard here.
You have said that this is a tough case for the prosecution to prove. You still believe that?
It's still a really tough case. I mean, it's the amount of time that's passed, it's potential credibility issues with key witnesses, and it's the fact, again, that they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But don't forget it. We're talking about a case where Bill Cosby could die in prison.
Yeah, he's 79 years old.
If he's convicted. And I think sometimes we forget the stakes here when talking about this case.
The alternative media, Jerry. That's where you hear the truth.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
You're listening to the dark and disturbing Holy Hexes edition of your Morning Monarchy. Is Cosby of Jekyll and Hyde for our time? Is he an example? Is he all those things and so much more? As mentioned previously by our buddy Lauren Coleman of CopyCatEffect.com, Soundgarden's Chris Cornell explained the term Jesus Christ pose and his song of the same name thusly, quote, "You just see it a lot with really beautiful people or famous people exploiting that symbol as to imply that they're either a deity or persecuted somehow by their public. So it's pretty much a song that is non-religious but expressing being irritated by seeing that." In looking at the deaths of prominent figures in the grunge community, Lauren Coleman came across the story of Mia Zapata. I recall reading about this as a kid in West Virginia, still in high school, just reading music magazines and getting my hands on whatever kind of culture I could. She was the singer of a Seattle indie band called The Gits, G-I-T-S, formed in Yellow Springs, Ohio in '86. After Mia Zapata's move to the West Coast, she became very successful and a surprise spokesperson for the women's music scene in Seattle. but the flame burned out quickly in Seattle on July 7th, 1993. Zapata was raped and murdered. How the body was left seemed highly symbolic. A woman discovered Zapata's body in the street near the Comet Tavern around 3:30 a.m., near the intersection of 24th South and South Washington in Seattle's Central District. Zapata's body was found with her arms out and her legs crossed, and she was placed between two Roman Catholic buildings on either side of the street. Zapata's body was found, as even Unsolved Mysteries noted, lying face up in an almost Christ-like pose. In the aftermath of Zapata's murder, friends created a self-defense group, Home Alive, which organized benefit concerts and released albums with the participation of many of Seattle's musical elite, including Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Heart, Presidents of the United States of America. Joan Jett also recorded an album with the surviving members of the Gits called Evil Stig. Gits live backwards. Joan Jett and Kathleen Hanna, pioneer of the feminist punk rock riot girl movement, wrote a song called Go Home that was later released on Jett's '94 album, Pure and Simple. You might, of course, remember that Kathleen Hanna is with her, the woman who's been noted as having slaves in Arkansas. We'll have to talk about that some other time. Joan Jett also recorded a single, Bob, whose earnings were contributed to the investigation of Zapata's murder. To this end, the band Gits and Jett appeared on America's Most Wanted, appealing to the public for information. The case was solved in 2004 when Zapata's murderer, Jesus Mesquia, was brought to trial and convicted. Yes, his name was Jesus. Intriguingly, on July 13th, 2008, Joan Jett guest starred on Law & Order: Criminal Intent. The episode, called Reunion, had Joan Jett playing a fading rock star named Sylvia Rhodes. Rhodes, Rhodes, ends up dead on her apartment floor. Lost on the 2008 audience, of course, was the pose that Jett took on the television drama appeared to mirror exactly how Zapata was found in 1993. Looking closer at the promotional photography from the episode, which of course will be included in the show notes, the positioning also duplicates a side view of the Thoth Tarot card of the Hanged Man. The Thoth Tarot is a divinatory tarot deck painted by Lady Frida Harris, according to instructions from Aleister Crowley. Crowley referred to this deck as the Book of Thoth. Lady Harris was invited to meet Crowley on June 9th, 1937, and on May 11th, 1938, Lady Harris became Crowley's disciple and also a member of Ordo Temple Orientis. Chris Cornell basically went from the Jesus Christ pose to the Hanged Man. Really strange, interesting stories coming from our buddy Lauren Coleman at copycateffect.com. And now, as long as we've clicked on the boom tube, it's perhaps a Freudian slip, two very prominent televangelists, Pastor Chris and Benny Hinn, are launching a 24-hour TV channel, Love World USA, which will be available in July to Spectrum Cable subscribers.
I've got something I want to bring to your understanding. We are about launching a new network in the United States, Love World USA. Yeah. And this is really, really, really going to be powerful. Because what we're discussing here is what people are going to be experiencing in their rooms, in their cars, in their offices, everywhere. The power of the Holy Ghost like never before.
Get ready for it.
We're bringing that consciousness into the church and into the whole world. God is about to shake this. Pastor Ben, can you talk to them about this thing? What's the significance of this in these last days? Because we are in the last days.
You want me to tell them now?
Yes, please. Something is about to happen.
Yeah. Well, we're here announcing today to the world, and they will soon find out, that Pastor Chris and myself are launching a network called Love World USA, that will focus on the power of the Holy Ghost. We don't want just another boring network. We want signs and wonders. We want miracles. We want the power of God to be seen every single day.
Let's get ready to rumble. Those gay demons, you guys have to see this video. Quite opulent. And the way they're just hyping the crowd up. And even in that part where he said, you know, Pastor Chris, and of course me, he raises his hands to hype up the crowd as if to say, now hoot and holler for me. They're like wrestlers hyping the crowd. Global Televangelist to launch new TV station, which of course came just a couple of weeks as we reported for you. IRS agents raided the Benny Hinn Ministries headquarters in North Texas. We end your Holy Hexes headlines with a question. CERN director attended Bilderberg. Why did CERN go to Bilderberg this year? TruthStream Media has another fantastic video about it. And our buddy Andy asked the question, hey, maybe they were going to do a secret performance from His Name is Alive. Maybe they could perform Patterns of Light live there for Bilderberg. Good God. There's your Holy Hexes headlines. The darkest, strangest, most important stories I could find for you, my friends. All put together using hashtag Holy Hexes. Hey, our latest episode of New World Next Week is published, episode 312. Reality intercepted as deep state winner busted. Pretty important episode of your New World Next Week. We've also got a little bit of not unmitigated good news about civil asset forfeiture. And all the other news you've come to expect from a little show that's been around for nearly 7 years, 8 years. Spread the word about the latest New World Next Week episode, and of course, we'll play the audio from that episode coming up today on your MediaMonarchy.com stream. MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Streaming live Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Now again, as I always like to remind you, all the stories that we covered this morning, we tweet out about an hour before showtime. So if you're listening live, as I appreciate you listening live, you can follow along to the stories. You can read along as we're doing them. Appropriately enough, we're going to wrap up today with a little music from She-Devils. But first, the very important look at this day in history. June 8th, 632. Muhammad, the Islamic prophet, dies in Medina. Jumping ahead a century and a half, June 8th, 1887, Herman Hollerith, hey, there he is again, applies for U.S. patent number 395781 for the art of compiling statistics, which was his punch card calculator. June 8th, 1906, Theodore Roosevelt signs the Antiquities Act into law, authorizing the president to restrict the use of certain parcels of public land so he could go shoot stuff on it. I mean, with historical or conservation value. June 8th, 1912, Carl Laemmle incorporates Universal Pictures. 1918, a solar eclipse is observed at Baker City, Oregon by scientists and an artist hired by the United States Navy. I like the idea that getting news of like, oh, we've got an artist, stand by, we'll draw it for you. June 8th, 1949, Helen Keller, Dorothy Parker, who we've heard the ballad of Dorothy Parker on Prince Day yesterday. Danny Kaye, Friedrich March, John Garfield, Paul Mooney, and, Edward G. Robinson. All named in an FBI report as Communist Party members. Past is prologue. Russia gonna get ya. It's in the news today. All your funny left-leaning friends who just got really active in the last 6 months, really started paying attention. They are glued to it. Glued to it. June 8th, 1949, on this day, George Orwell's 1984 was published. June 8th, 1959, the U.S. Barbero and United States Postal Service attempt the delivery of mail via missile mail. June 8th, 1966, an F-104 Starfighter collides with the XB-70 Valkyrie prototype number 2, destroying both aircraft during a photo shoot near Edwards Air Force Base. Joseph A. Walker, a NASA test pilot, and Carl Cross, a United States Air Force test pilot, both killed. June 8th, 1967. During the Six-Day War, Israeli aircraft and torpedo boats attacked the USS Liberty in international waters off Egypt's Gaza Strip. The intelligence ship, well marked as an American vessel and only lightly armed, was attacked first by Israeli aircraft that fired napalm and rockets at the ship. The Liberty attempted to radio for assistance, but the Israeli aircraft blocked the transmissions. Eventually, the ship was able to make contact with the U.S. carrier Saratoga, and 12 fighter jets and 4 tanker planes were dispatched to defend the Liberty. When word of their deployment reached Washington, however, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara ordered them recalled to the carrier, and they never reached the Liberty. The reason for the recall remains unclear.
It was a beautiful sunny day. The morning preceding the attack, there were 12 overflights of Israeli aircraft observing us, very friendly.
Ernest Gallo remembers the day like it was yesterday. Not too different from any other service day, but he says all that changed when from a lower deck he heard an attack coming from Israeli forces firing upon the USS Liberty from the air and sea.
All of a sudden, Israeli aircraft came out of the sky and started strafing and bombing the ship. And the attack was in 3 phases.
On June 8, 1967, Gallo says 34 U.S. servicemen died in the attack. Another 174 were wounded. They were honored over the weekend during a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. The Israeli regime paid nearly $20 million in compensation to the victims and the U.S. government since then. However, survivors say there has never been an extensive investigation as to what happened despite numerous letters sent to lawmakers. This year marks the 46th anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty. Veterans and survivors of the attack traveled here from all over the country. They say this is an important issue that more Americans need to know about. Several U.S. politicians were invited to come to the ceremony. None attended. Some say that the true details of what happened were covered up by the president at the time, Lyndon Johnson, but are still ignored to this day.
Very angry. I'm getting disgusted with it. I was only 19 at the time. Now I'm 65. I'm getting disgusted. You won't find it in the history book. If you do, I wish you'd let me know.
Other veterans say that the United States is not acting in its own best interests, where money to foreign wars has overshadowed much-needed domestic services.
It just seemed like we too often placed the interests of other countries, especially Israel, above the interests of our own country.
Like the brave men who kept the Liberty afloat after the attack, veterans like Gallo say they will continue to push for the truth to be known on that fateful day.
I was very upset that our supposed to be our ally would be so vicious to try and sink the ship as hard as they did, and they got away with murder.
One observer noticed that the wreath commemorating the USS Liberty only remained in place for a few minutes before it was replaced by another wreath from a different entity.
50 years ago today, the USS Liberty incident. Continuing to look at this day in history, June 8th, 1972. 9-year-old Phan Thi Kim Phuc is burned by napalm, an event captured by Associated Press photographer Nick Oot moments later while the young girl seen running down a road in what would become an iconic Pulitzer Prize-winning photo. June 8th, 1982, Bluff Cove air attacks during the Falklands War. 56 British servicemen are killed by an Argentine air attack on 2 landing ships, RFA Sir Galahad and RFA Sir Tristram. The Falklands War, as the UK gets its muster up for more war in this present day. June 8th, 2001. Mamoru Takuma kills 8 and injures 15 in a mass stabbing at an elementary school in the Osaka prefecture of Japan. June 8, 2008, at least 7 people are killed and 10 injured in a stabbing spree in Tokyo, Japan. That same day, June 8, 2008, at least 37 miners go missing after an explosion in a Ukrainian coal mine causes it to collapse. Published to my own media Monarchy, 10 years ago today, RoboBear rescues wounded troops. A documentary called The Onassis Dynasty. Senate committee passes habeas bill trying to restore habeas corpus. Good luck with that. And even episode 28 of my own weekly Media Monarchy broadcast published on this day a decade ago. And really interesting. Theater festival under fire for Rachel Corrie, the theater festival I used to work for back in West Virginia. For a few years, I was sound designer at the Contemporary American Theater Festival, and I worked for director Ed Herendeen off and on for almost a decade. I can say firsthand that Ed has always staged controversial plays, from the death of Danny Casolaro in The Octopus to Sleeping with Terrorists in Homeland Security. His provocative choices make theater more urgent and important. That's one of the main reasons why people want to work with him. They put on a play, My Name is Rachel Corrie, and they lost funding. Actually, one of the big Jewish funders, usually of the theater festival, pulled his funding that year. All those stories published to MediaMonarchy.com a decade ago today. Past is prologue. I've been doing it for a while. Holy moly, look at these birthdays. June 8th. Frank Lloyd Wright would have been 150 today. It's also Ralph Yarborough's birthday. Hey, speaking of Aleister Crowley, it's Barbara Bush's birthday. Jerry Stiller, Joan Rivers. Do you guys know I interviewed Joan Rivers? I was one of the last people to interview Joan Rivers. You can find that in the archives. Nancy Sinatra, William Calley, Boz Scaggs, Kathy Baker, Bonnie Tyler, Greg Ginn of Black Flag, Tim Berners-Lee. He invented this thing we're all using called the Worldwide Wiretap. It's also Griffin Dunn's birthday. Scott Adams, famed conservative and Dilbert creator. Keenan Ivory Wayans, Mick Hucknall from Simply Red, Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, Rob Pilatus, the late not-so-great half of Milli Vanilli, Gabrielle Giffords, Lindsay Davenport, Kanye King Kill West turns 40 today. So he's just a couple months older than me. It's also Derek Chuck's birthday, who we heard from yesterday on Pump Up the Volume, and Sarah Watkins from Nickel Creek. I've got a dark daily DJ set coming up at noon for you, and I'll wet that whistle with brand new music from She Devils. It's the second single we've played from them and their new sub-pop release. We'll listen to a song called The World Laughs from She Devils. And that's the Holy Hexes edition of your Morning Monarchy. And I appreciate you being here. We are streaming live, MediaMonarchy.com/listen, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we are brought to you by you at MediaMonarchy.com/support. Huge, heartfelt thanks. And there it is. Holy Hexes, Thursday, June 8th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato. For MediaMonarchy.com, thanking you again so much for listening and taking part, and reminding you, as always, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
Inject you
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology, and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.